done, I'm going to ask Michael Starr if he will he's going to kind of share with you what you will see on those boards. And again, this is a walking around meeting today and not necessarily a seated meeting. So what you want to do is really just kind of, are you going to bring it up this way, Mike? How do you want to do it?
Just switch these around.
Okay.
Go from scenario 1 to 2 to 3.
Okay.
And then the last board over there.
Okay. Okay. All right. Sounds good. Okay. Mike, can someone help him? Yeah. Well, I think that's right. 2 is good. He's just changing 1 and 3. So 2 is fine. Okay. And then he will explain all of that.
All right. So I know the folks on the other side of the room are going to, unless you've got. Can y'all hear me over there? Y'all might want to come over unless you have telescopic vision. It's gonna be hard to see what I'm describing here. But we've got 3 scenarios laid out in front of you here. And before I start getting into specifics, would just like to say that these are none of these are building designs. These are only site concept studies. So these are all site concept studies that really just look at possible building placement and massing. We have this scenario here, which would maintain the tower and the wings and add the necessary space to make up for the deficiencies that exist currently and are projected to exist over the next 10 years or so. Scenario number 2 is a scheme where the tower is maintained, the wings are torn down, and an addition for Judicial is built on the north and south sides of the existing tower, and a new administrative building is built kind of in the northeast corner. And then the far scenario looks at complete demolition of the current government center and what a new government center might look like. So with this option, you can see images that look very similar to what you're used to seeing and have been seeing for 45 years or so. And a multi-story addition that would accommodate Judicial, mainly Judicial functions here, and the wings would generally serve as the office portions, but you would still have offices mixed in with Judicial use as well. Just because of the way the building's configured, everything doesn't work out perfectly in terms of the square footages where you could completely isolate the city offices versus just the Judicial, which we call Judicial and non-Judicial. We would have proposed the existing parking deck then would stay, that's below grade, and possibly a new parking deck would be erected on the other side of 10th Street where the flat parking area currently exists. So again, this would be the addition to accommodate the square footage that we have a deficit on the Judicial side right now, and would also create a new entry. As we know, that's one of kind of the biggest problems. One of the larger problems of the current facility is it does not have a front door. Nobody knows how to get in there. And even when you do find it, you're entering in the bowels of the building. So we would propose to provide a new front door as part of that. But of course, because you've still got many of the limitations of the existing building, it's going to be less than ideal. I will say that a lot of the problems that you looked at there in terms of mechanical issues and piping and so forth could be alleviated because the proposal would tear everything down to, in terms of the interiors, all of the walls, ceilings, mechanical systems, piping would disappear. That would all be demolished, and it would be completely rebuilt from the concrete and the exterior walls in. Now, the exterior walls would also be torn out back to structure, so you've got curtain wall in between the structural columns that you can see here, which is inefficient quarter-inch glazing that causes a tremendous amount of heat load. As John was talking about on the video, on the south side, on this side of the building, you get direct impact, and on the east and west, of course, you get a lot of heat gain there. And because the HVAC system is old and it's not zoned properly, you get cold people on the north side, you get people that are hot on the south side. We would take care of that with systems and install new, much more efficient insulated glazing systems with low E coatings and so forth, everything up to or exceeding energy codes and so forth, like you would design a new building. So that would do a couple of things. That would make the occupants a lot more comfortable, and it would save a significant amount of money on energy use every year. One of the other things that I wanted to mention was, in addition to the expansion on the south side, because of some of the issues on the inside with circulation and emergency egress, it would be necessary to add on some sort of vertical element, which is just kind of blocked in right here. Again, these are not building designs, but some vertical elements would need to be put in place for possibly new elevators and or stairs. The current stairs do not meet code. They're not even close to meeting code. The rails do not meet code. They don't handle enough people. You've got your largest load of people is at the courtrooms at the very top of the building. The stairways are not wide enough to accommodate the number of people that can be in those courtrooms. The doors aren't wide enough. There's no way with the limitations of the existing structure to enlarge those stairs. So you'd be looking at some outboard modifications, which could open up the opportunity to expand the restrooms and make those handicap accessible. But again, since you're going back to the existing structure, everything that's built new would be up to current code. So it would be a fully accessible building, and it would meet all of your life safety codes, would be sprinklered, et cetera. It is a safety hazard right now without the sprinkler system. And the stairwells on tall buildings such as we have here should be pressurized to keep smoke out in a fire situation. That's also not in place right now, so there's a number of safety issues that we would address under this scenario as well.
And I think you're also in the video that we only have fire,
sprinklers.
Sprinkler systems only in the parking deck and on the ground floor of the government center, nowhere else. That's it.
Right, so again, where most of your people are on court day up here, you got a long way to go if there were a fire to get out of the building. So we would alleviate that situation with new life safety systems. Any questions on this scenario?
Have there ever been sprinkler systems on the upper levels?
No, ma'am.
No.
No, ma'am.
Excuse me. Am I
Yes.
to understand that this particular scenario is just pretty much just to preserve the exterior? I mean, largely?
It would, this is a scenario that would preserve it as much as possible while still preparing it to serve for another 50 years by modernizing the systems, by modernizing the exterior envelope like we were talking about to be more efficient. But this comes closest to preserving the building in its current form, yes. Unfortunately, in order to make it functional, you would have to put a rather large addition somewhere on the building, and the south side being the most obvious if the wings are maintained. So that's why it's being proposed there. So you really want to touch the existing building as little as possible, but again, for safety purposes and for functional reasons, additions are required. So the current square footage is not going to, it's currently too small, and of course, as things continue to grow, additional courts and so forth, it's just going to continue to get smaller as the years progress. Any other questions? All right, I'll move down to scenario number 2, which again, we'll look at the site plan first. This proposes keeping the government center tower, demolishing the wings, and building a separate office building for city functions at the corner of 10th and 2nd Avenue here that is oriented perpendicular to the existing Judicial Center here, but parallel with the wings that would sit here and here. And what that helps to do is create a much more scenarios have in common, being cognizant of the fact that in scenario 1, where the existing design, because of the way it's configured in a U shape and the plazas are raised and inaccessible to the public, it feels very insular, it feels very closed off. It is the antithesis of being a public building in a lot of ways. So both of these try to address that by welcoming the public into the site with large open areas that could be used potentially after hours. And additions here that would be lower in scale because you've got additional square footage here. So you can do 2 similar additions at a smaller scale for new courtrooms and associated functions. The existing parking deck would go away, and as would all of the kind of restrictions that you've got there, the lack of sally port, et cetera. And we'd propose a new below-grade parking deck here that potentially could be secured for sheriff and either employee use or judges or whatever is decided in the future, but that could have secure entry points to both buildings that are below grade. Could have separate entries for judges, employees, and of course prisoners that are coming for trial. So it would be a much more secure situation there. And in order to get enough parking, you would then look at another parking structure across 9th Street there. The green that you see here is just showing possibly a green roof, a courtyard on top of these 2 additions here. And then you can see kind of from a massing standpoint how this is a lot lower than what we were looking at in scenario 1. And then the city office building here kind of holds the corner down at the corner of 2nd Avenue and 10th there. And this would be the view from the opposite corner looking into that new open courtyard that's created there with entry elements here and here and creating that public space, which I think certainly desirable. Any questions on this scenario? All right, we'll move down to the last scenario, which is a complete tear down of the existing facility, proposing a new judicial center that's behind the footprint of the existing judicial center, and then a new government building on the opposite corner. The previous scenario we're looking at had government admin building here. This shows it at this corner here, relates in scale to the River Center, holds this kind of urban edge that exists now. But here we're creating 2 large open public spaces. This would be more the formal kind of front yard, and then this would be the less formal backyard that creates an extension here of the green space all the way from Broadway past the River Center and then terminates here in front of the Springer, which keeps that open space there, which I think is nice. And the building also steps down in scale here to address the smaller structures that are there along 2nd Avenue. Parking would be provided here on the south half of the site, below grade, again, secure entrances into both facilities, and drive-through, drop-off, etc. here, additional parking above grade here. And what this allows us to do, the placement of the building here, maintain the existing tower. You tear down the wings, you build the new Judicial Center behind it, and once that's complete, move everybody into it, and then you demolish the existing tower and build a new government building. So you don't have to go through all the pain of relocating everyone in the offices and having temporary courtrooms, which would be necessary really with both of the other options we're looking at, because all of the construction would be proposed to be done at one time rather than going floor by floor, which would obviously take a lot longer and be substantially more expensive. Any question on this scenario? Walk over and just show you a little bit of the massing. So this would be the proposed Judicial Center here. It's very open on the north and south sides. Would also have shading, again, high technology glazing to keep the heat gain down. You've got two buildings that are similar in scale. So this is a little bit smaller and skinnier footprint for the office building, and the Judicial building would be a little bit taller. All of the major court spaces being in a lower block below it, and then the support functions would really be above it. But again, that allows the building to step down in scale to relate to the buildings across 2nd Avenue. And it also allows both of these buildings to feel friendly with each other and not have, since most of the program is really here, not have a big brother, little brother effect. You've got two buildings that are similar and monumental at the same time. And
I have a question.
yes.
Approximately how many floors are you talking about for each building, generally?
I think that we're talking about 12 to 14 floors here and 7 to 8 stories here. And the pricing also has a line item for shelling an additional floor in each building for future use, so that we don't run into the same kind of issues 10 or 15 years down the road where we realize, oh, we built it for our current needs and what we projected, but hey, we've grown a lot more, and now we can't fit here, and we have to start getting annexes and other buildings like we've had to do in the past. So it's a lot easier to build an additional floor and just keep it completely open, called a shelled space or a white box space, so that it's easily built out in the future. All of the systems would be designed to accommodate that additional load and so forth during the initial design, and that just allows a lot more flexibility.
So your proposal on number 3 is one white box space in each building, one, is that
That's
correct?
one floor.
One floor?
Yes, one
extra
floor,
that's
one
just
extra
sitting
floor
there. I got you.
that's empty
Empty,
when the
nothing
building
really built.
when the building opens, yes, and can be filled in the future, yes.
Gotcha.
Of course, this is very early.
Oh, yeah.
That could be cut out at some point, but it's
I heard
just
that story about the building that we're in, that was a proposal early on, and
That's
they
correct.
chose not to do it, and now doing it would cost a whole lot more money.
absolutely. Mhm. So that's just addressing that concern up front, because this is a master plan kind of idea, and it makes sense to do that. So we have put that in. So everybody wants to know about money. Again, we don't have real buildings to design. These are just concepts and big ideas. But we did have to put pencil to paper and try and get some rough figures out there for everybody to understand the kind of order of magnitude that we're talking about here. For scenario number 1, all in, you're looking at about $115 million. So that would be a complete renovation of the existing facility and an addition. That includes the parking structure. Scenario 2, Looking at something very similar in cost, about $116 million. And then scenario number 3, $127 million. So there's only projected to be about a $12 million delta between scenario 1 and 3. You also do have a little bit more exposure, a little bit more risk exposure with both 1 and 2 when you're renovating a building. You just never know what you're going to run into sometimes when you start tearing out walls and so forth. You might find some ugly surprises sometimes, so you'd have to add a little bit more contingency into that. In addition, the square footage on both of these had to be bumped up because you're dealing with existing structures, the inefficiencies that you run into when you have to keep an existing structure where things really don't fit together like they would in a new building would cause the size of the program to increase. So these numbers reflect that. We've got about a 30,000 square foot premium between the renovation scenarios